to the official launch of the One World Program for the IEPC, the International Education Professional Certificate. My name's Andy Coxall. I'm Managing Director of Evolve Careers at Common Purpose. So we are essentially the EdTech arm of Common Purpose, who are a global leadership development nonprofit. And we have the great pleasure of partnering with NAFSA and with Times Higher Education on this program. So today, we want to give you an opportunity to really understand what the IEPC is all about, what the One World Program is. So we're going to go into lots of detail, but first and foremost, I wanted to invite my colleague Joanne to introduce herself. Joanne, please do say hello.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Andy. We're excited to welcome you and thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedules to join us today, wherever you're calling or joining us from. We would love if you put in chat where you are, who you are, so we can have some interaction in our chat. My name is Joanne Hartman. As Andy mentioned, I'm the Senior Impact Officer at NAFSA and really grateful for this partnership that brings professional development globally to everyone around the world. And as Andy mentioned, we'll be talking a lot more about the IEPC itself.
Fabulous. Thank you, Joanne. So yeah, please do let us know where you're calling in from. You know, looking at the list, I can see people from Brazil, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, Italy, India, Pakistan, the whole world. And this is very much reflective of what the IEPC One World Program is all about. So what I should say to start off with, the International Education Professional Certificate has been running, as many of you, I hope, will know, for about 12, 15 months now. And we've had hundreds upon hundreds of international education leaders from across the world participating in the program. But now, off the back of the recent NAFSA, where the need for, I think it's fair to say, but also the appreciation of community within IE and within international education was remarkably palpable and so powerful as well. We felt now was the time to launch the One World Program with the IEPC. So people can still do it as an asynchronous self-paced course, but the One World Program is designed to bring together a cohort of international education leaders to go through this program together, to be able to access the course, but also access the network and to learn from and with each other as they go through that. We'll explain what that looks like a bit later on. But I did want to say this is very much building off what we've been doing over the last 15 months together as partners on this program and the hundreds of people who've been through it. And we'll talk more about their story and their journey. We're going to start off with the story of the IEPC and how it grew from the work that NAFSA did with the International Education Professional Competencies, as you can see in front of you. So Joanne, please, the floor is yours. Please do tell that story.
Thank you. Thanks, Andy. And thanks to all of you who participated in the poll questions. Very insightful for us where you access your resources and professional development as well. As Andy mentioned, you know, community is so important to us, right, within the field of international education. And coming off of San Diego, as he mentioned, the feel of community, the networking, particularly in turbulent times, I think more than ever, is a wonderful feeling. And so based out of that, we thought about this program. But just to give you a little bit of background on how the framework and foundation of the IEPC is built upon. So it's actually framed around the NAFSA International Education Professional Competencies. This is our second version. In 2015, we launched the first version and always knew that, you know, as international educators in a dynamic field, working with, you know, changing landscapes and environments and government policies and all kinds of stuff that happen, we always knew that competencies aren't just set in stone. They change with the times. So through an 18-month process, and the silver lining I take out of the pandemic is I had the opportunity to work with 15 people in the field. We had a commission of folks within the field to go through this process. And as I mentioned, it was an 18-month process where we had different iterations, different phases to come up with the 12 competencies that you see in your screen today. These are the foundation that we built the IEPC on. you will see that they address the competencies that are required, that our commission felt like this is what we need in this time. As we came out of the pandemic in 2022 was when we launched the International Education Professional Competencies. We have developed a variety of different tools around it. For example, there's a set of interview tools that if you're hiring manager, you can use those, or if you're a job seeker, you can look at those as a frame of reference for these competencies. So they're pretty in-depth. We have other resources like webinars, everything that we do at NAFSA in terms of developing professional resources and training and workshops and webinars, books, publications, is framed around this international education professional competency. So they address directly all of the 12 here. Some are focused on data collection or inclusion and equity, but they're always framed around these competencies. So next slide, in terms of now for your curiosity, the global impact of our learners across the globe. This shows you across the different regions around the world where people are that have taken or are currently enrolled in the IEPC itself. So we're very excited to now have this cohesive cohort coming up in the fall to have, again, build community around this. So a little more about the nuts and bolts, if you will, or logistics under the hood kind of thing. We've gotten questions about what the program is like, how do I access it, just the nuts and bolts, like I said. So next slide. In terms of how we package this, you can take the full certificate, or you can take it package by package. There are 4 packages. Within each package is 3 modules. And if you go on the website, you'll see how they are grouped, if you will. They are led by subject matter experts in the field, global as well as US. US is part of the globe, right? So we have a mix of voices, but these are people who will give you real world examples, how it's applicable within your own environment. They give you scenarios that they've lived through and are going through. The training is entirely asynchronous, but we'll talk a little bit more about this program in particular, even though it's asynchronous. So each module takes about 60 to 75 minutes to complete, excluding this. What I love about each module is there's an action plan that you take away with you. Part of this is really about how you apply those competencies to your own environment and case scenario that you're living through. So the 60 to 75 minutes within each module also, and Andy's going to do a live demo. The nice thing about it is if you only have 15 to 20 minute chunks in your day, you could just do a 15 to 20 minute chunk. You don't have to sit down and do the full 60 minutes all at once, because there are also places where you do your self-reflection, things that you have to think about and plan for. So that's also part of the flexibility of it being asynchronous. And as soon as you enroll, you can begin the program, or you can be part of this cohort program that we're going to talk about more later. And on the screen, you'll see these are some of the outcomes and takeaways that you'll be able to do. So advocating, for example, your priorities at your institution or organization, connecting with individual roles as international educators within your institution as well, nurturing and building and maintaining constructive conversations, particularly if you have a cohort that you're going through this program with. And I'll mention, I showed you the map of where we're having an impact and where our learners are located. We have institutions and organizations that have adopted this as an institution-wide professional development experience that teams and staff are going through as a whole, right? So they can identify and have a shared learning experience and grow from that as well. So Andy, I'll hand it over to you now to do your demo.
Thanks, Joanne. One thing, two things I just sort of I would highlight that Joanne said there in terms of the research that's gone into these competencies. My team designed the IEPC, so I was able to see the really intensive research that went into it at an academic level, focus groups, SME, subject matter expert level, to come up with these competencies and to understand their importance and relevance. Criticality, I don't think that's a word, in today's world. And actually, it's so in-depth and so thought through and so rooted and grounded in international education today. And that then manifests through the subject matter experts that we are able to work with. I hope you all know the caliber and the breadth that NAFSA has access to in this sector. And so Joanne and her team and her colleagues handpicked people from across the world to feature as subject matter experts in this course as exemplars of those competencies. People who understand them at a really deep level, but people who are also living them on a daily basis, and people that are role modeling what best practice looks like. And so I think this course is maybe different to some other things that you've seen out there, which are more theoretical or conceptual. This is built on the academic, the theoretical, conceptual, but then brought to life through the research, through the focus groups, through the subject matter experts. And as you'll see now, when I show you under the hood, that will give you a real sense of how through. So, as Joanne mentioned, the IEPC is made up of multiple packages. I'm just going to show you one. I'm not going to show you all of them. You'll be pleased to hear. So I'm picking the Agile Leadership package. So this is what the learning management system looks like that we run, and this is what you'll see if you sign up to it. For each of the packages, we start by doing a skills assessment against the learning outcomes for that particular package. So here you'll see there's 4 on a page, there's 12 in total. So there's 12 different learning outcomes that we're driving to within this. You assess yourself at the beginning, you then assess yourself at the end so that we can measure that learning gain. And we'll be showing you what some of that looks like for real life participants in a second. And then you have your package here, which is broken down into 3 sections. Again, that whole notion of it being self-paced and bite-sized, and that you can do it on the go. So you can see each of the sections. Ignore that. That's just because I'm not going to fill in the full assessment. So we start off with the leadership section. So at the beginning, we recap about what each of the different packages are: decision-making, compliance care, inclusive programs, and this one, which is Agile Leadership. Quick reflection back on those competencies. So in this Agile Leadership package, we're looking at 3 modules. First on leadership, second relationship cultivation, and the third one is about communications. And then that connection back to the framework and the competencies that Joanne introduced earlier. This is very much speaking to leadership and some of the core competencies that those experts and NAFSA and people in the field came up with. So for this leadership module, which, as I say, is one of those 3, I'll walk you through it. So the key learning outcomes are: 1, that you'll be able to identify key leadership traits in international education, including soft skills, innovation, mentorship, and leading without formal authority. That you'll be able to articulate how to create clear value propositions that align with institutional goals and address diverse stakeholder priorities effectively. And thirdly, that you'll explore strategies for coalition building in IE, focusing on strategies for fostering collaboration, overcoming challenges, and building trust across diverse stakeholders. So really clear outcomes that we're driving to, and I hope as you hear them, they're things that you think, actually, those are critical things for me. Those are my priorities as much as they are for our wonderful SME, Padana Zatoshti, who is Senior Director of Global Programs and Services at San Jose State University, and she serves as a Senior International Officer within the university. So we worked very closely with Padana to understand what leadership looks like, and then filmed her, and you'll see that here. So the whole course is built around interviews, a long interview broken up into short sections with our subject matter experts to really bring this to life and ground it in their reality. So start kicking off. What does leadership mean? What does it mean in the context of international education? Leadership is key to creating inclusive learning, driving innovation, and promoting cross-border collaboration for better education. So Padana starts to talk about what defines a great leader. What are some of those key characteristics? She talks about the importance of soft skills and adaptability. As Joanne said, we have reflection questions throughout. So it's critical here, that connection from, okay, what's Padana's talking about? How does this relate to the competencies? But ultimately, what does it mean to me? What does it mean for me, my context, my role, my challenges, my future growth, my aspirations? So throughout, constantly bring it back. So here, we ask you to share an example that demonstrates your involvement in advocacy, education, or innovation in international education, and what leadership qualities come to mind when you think of a great leader. You're going to be filling in these reflections as you go, and then you'll see later on, they then get used as part of your overall reflection and action planning ahead. We then start to talk about the significance of innovation, agility in international education. From her perspective, again, reflections. How have you encouraged your staff to improve efficiency, effectiveness, or services offered? Tell us about a time you supported innovation from staff members, and so on. We then start to talk about leadership beyond titles. This really interesting idea that there's I guess the sort of carrot and stick leadership one has in situations where you have the formal title that says you're the boss, you can make the decisions, ultimately it's your call. But when you move beyond that, when you're operating spaces where either your title doesn't matter or you're in a space where titles just aren't relevant, how do you operate in that situation? How do you lead? How do you lead out in situations where you have no formal authority at all? Because it's a fundamentally different style of leadership to the carrot and stick of leadership that you can utilize when you're the boss, as per the title. And again, we get you to reflect on what that means for you. And then we start to talk about the importance of mentorship and leadership development. We then offer quick top tips for effective leadership across all these different areas, fostering intercultural competency, viewing failures as learning opportunities, and so on. I will speed up. Value prop. So why is a value proposition important? And it may be a term that you don't use much in your role, but it's a really critical piece that helps provide focus and direction and helps teams to align what they're doing with institutional goals and strengths. And so we start to move on about that. Fanta Aw starts to talk about how we can craft a compelling value proposition, how you start to tailor that to an audience. Again, advice and guidance on how you can do that. We then move on to start to talk about coalition building. So how do you effectively build coalitions to overcome obstacles, policy variations, competing interests? How do you establish those common goals of mutual respect? So Fanta Aw talks from her experience around coalition building. How do you break down silos? How do you foster collaboration across institutions and across departments, which is so critical to everything that we do? We then start to think about some of the challenges that you're going to face. Within that, how do you navigate cultural differences? How do you overcome those barriers and silos? And then we start to come into the action planning and takeaways for this particular session within leadership. So they're not here because I haven't been filling them in. But if you've been a better student than I, and you'd filled in your reflection notes as you were going through this, all your notes would show here. So you can look at your reflections as you went through that module for each of the different areas of leadership, value prop, and coalition building. And then you can also download your action plan, which helps you to then start to think about how do you break that down. So you've been through that experience, you've made those notes, you've had those aha moments and reflections and learned from Fanta Aw as you've gone. Then how are you actually going to put that into practice? So in the short term, over between a week and a month, how are you going to develop and embrace soft skills, practice agility and innovation, leading without a title? Longer term goals throughout the year, how are you going to foster intercultural competence? What are some of the actions that you could do? Why would you do them, and how? So really forcing everyone, and force is a strong word, I know, but the critical part to this is not just about reflection, it's about action. So how do you take your learnings and implement them in the real world? So after that, you can also then, as resources from Fanta Aw, which she's personally highlighted, there's a whole range of resources from NAFSA that you can access as well that you can continue to work through. So yes, 60 to 75 minutes outside of the action planning piece, and also outside of all the additional learning resources that are there. So you can take that at your own pace, you can come back to it and continue to work on it. The other things I'll just highlight are, when you complete, you get your certificates, of course, to outline that you've been through it. We also have micro credentials and digital badges that you can earn. So this is my digital backpack. And within this digital backpack, you can see here one of the packages, decision making. And so you will be issued with these instructions on how to set up your digital backpack if you don't know. You add them to it, and then you can share that directly. You press share, you can then share it on different social media platforms. which then looks like this on mine. So underneath experience, you have education, and then you have licenses and certifications. So here is the decision-making micro-credential issued by NAFSA, issued on May 24th, May 2024. When it expires 2 years later, what the unique credential ID is, and then anyone can click on show credential, and they'll actually then be able to see that credential. They'll be able to see the learning outcomes, what the earning criteria are when it was issued. So all of those elements are critical parts for you to be able to tell your story and to be able to show to the world what skills you've developed, how you've developed them, and to tell your story as a professional within this field. So that's that. I hope it gives you a bit of a sense and an understanding looking under the hood. I don't know, Joanne, is there anything you would add about the particular modules or packages that I didn't show or that you think is especially relevant?
No, I think, to Andy's point, thanks, Andy, for that demo. You see how deep some, the material is and how applicable they are to real situations. And the reflection piece I appreciate a lot because you can always hear and listen to a subject matter expert, but how does it apply to you? And particularly the action plan, as Andy showed you, is really based on, applicability to your institution, organization, situation, and it's chunked out for ongoing discussions or just within the first week after you finish a module or the course. So thank you, Andy.
Yeah, fantastic. One thing, there's just one question I saw that's popped up in terms of who the subject matter experts are. So I don't know, Joanne, while we're still, I guess, talking content, if you'd like to, beyond Padanaz, who are some of the other SMEs that they could meet?
Yeah, so as we both have mentioned, they are global voices. We have a faculty member who's based out of the UK. We have someone who was recruiting out of Saudi Arabia, for instance, has a US experience, but worked in Saudi Arabia for 8 years. We have US institutions represented, obviously. We have someone on the relationship building, for example, who works for the government of New Zealand, Education New Zealand, as an example, so has that cross-cultural perspective. I think one of the previous questions that was pre-submitted was, do the modules address cross-cultural competency? And they all do, because these are all people, international educators with years of experience in the field that have, again, practical advice, if you will, and knowledge to share with our community.
But one of the things I wanted to talk about next, I guess, having shown you under the hood, if I can use that metaphor, is the impact. So one of the things that we talk a lot actually within the IEPC is around data literacy and the importance of data management and how that helps you to tell your story, how it helps you to build your value proposition and so on. So I'm going to talk a bit about data, and then Joanne's going to talk more about wider impact beyond that. So across each of the 4 packages, so I showed you Agile Leadership, we also have inclusive programs, decision-making and compliance. We ask people at the end and within the post-assessment the extent to which they're better prepared for their role in international education as a result of the IEPC. So as you can see here, overall, we've had 85%, scoring 4 and 5 out of 5. Within that, with Agile Leadership leading the pack at 87% there. But when that starts to break down, I think it's quite interesting because it starts to speak about your context. So if you could move to the next slide, Andrea. I wanted to share some of the highlights and some of the specifics that people have taken from this. And I think it's important because it very much speaks to, I guess, your reality right now in terms of what the priorities are, what people are learning, what people want to take away. So within each of the different packages, so within Agile Leadership there, I just showed you one module within that. There are 3 learning outcomes. So for each of the different modules within it, there's a total of 12 learning outcomes as a result. So across those, we're seeing an average score of 4.4 out of 5 for Agile Leadership across all 12 learning outcomes, compliance care 4.2, decision making 4.1, inclusive programs 4.1 as well. And on the next slide, you can also then start to see what are the things that are standing out most to people. So based upon the scores, the higher scores, what are the topics that are really standing out to people as they go through the IEPC. And linked to this, there's just fabulous testimonials and reflections from your peers about how they're using this. But within agile leadership, for example, the importance of effectively engaging with diverse stakeholders and increasing people's capability to do that through this course with a score of 4.53 out of 5. The ability to lead without a formal title really resonating. And I think increasingly it's something that we all have to do, especially as our careers develop, is to understand how to operate in that space. And so that's something that really resonated. Similarly, the ability to build trust through clear communication with 4.49 out of 5 as well. Then when we come into decision making, and I know I didn't walk you through that particular module, but some of the things that are standing out to your peers who've been through it are the importance of understanding how communication styles affect relationships at work, people's ability to grow from feedback, the ability to align personal goals to institutional strategy. And I think you'll recognize within that there's some of those that are deeply personal in terms of people's ability to hear and listen and grow from feedback, to much more, I guess, strategic elements within how can you align to institutional strategy? What are your relationships at work like? How can you enhance those? So very much me and my leadership coupled with me and my ecosystem, me and my community, and how am I engaging with different people at what level? Compliance care, an area that NAFSA are renowned for in terms of supporting leaders within international education. And that's come through here as well in terms of helping to develop people's understanding of the significance of compliance for institutional safety and success, the importance of efficient communication channels during crises. We've all seen that over the last few years. And the ability to identify key stakeholders and risk management. And then finally, inclusive programs. So here, what are people taking away? How to promote belonging through cultural humility and valuing diverse identities. Now, how you navigate ethical considerations to create inclusive learning environments, and also having the confidence to collaborate with stakeholders to design inclusive international education programs. So these are some of the highlights. These are the sort of top threes, I guess, if I could call them that, that's coming out from participant feedback. But from data, we're going to add a bit of richness. So Joanne's going to talk about some of the broader feedback and action planning that's come out of this.
Yeah, next slide. So we're going to dive deeper into some of the comments and feedback that we've received from the learners themselves. So we talked about 4 packages. So there are 12 competencies. We divided these. You may have a question about how did your themes come up. It's because the competencies address very specific skill sets, right, and abilities. So within leadership, relationship cultivation, and communications, there was a theme that we pulled through throughout the 3 modules within this. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to read this quote here. This is from a learner who has had 20 plus years of experience in this field. And for this agile leadership, I want to point to, I came away with practical strategies for aligning priorities. So in this day and age, lots of different priorities. So aligning priorities, very important. Communicating transparently and investing in long-term partnerships that can adapt and thrive over time. So again, this is coming from someone who's had 20 years in the field and felt, coming away, they took away insights from others. I think if you are like me, I'm passionate about learning, and I can say that about Andy too and his team, that you always find an opportunity to learn, and learning insights from different subject matter experts. And I think that's why we're excited about this program too, is because you have the opportunity to connect and engage with others across the globe to then gain perspective and insights. Again, going back to the global nature and cultural competency, and we'll get to the next one on inclusion and equity, the inclusive programs part, right? So again, take a couple of seconds to read that. What I want to pull out is it requires a balance of personal commitment, collaboration, and self-care. to create meaningful and sustainable change. So balance of personal commitment, not just institutional. If you don't believe in inclusive programs and the work that you're doing, then you have more of a challenge, right? And how do you get there? Self-care was very much talked about, particularly by our inclusion and equity subject matter expert, in terms of it is hard work when you're talking, and during these turbulent times again, being able to talk about inclusion and equity. And I can say that not just for the US, but also I think other parts of the world. Important for us to think of ourselves. Wellness is important. So the self-care piece comes in throughout. And the teaching, learning, and facilitation piece also important that our subject matter expert also talks about, how within yourself with the reflection pieces that is reflected in the work you do when you are in the field. Next one on compliance care. This involves the risk management, risk assessment and crisis management piece, recruitment, and then compliance management. I think don't think of compliance management as just immigration, but regulatory, right? Even in the recruitment world, there are regulatory policies and rules that we all have to transition and maneuver around and navigate. So the compliance piece is important. The person here says the most valuable lesson from the modules is the critical importance of proactive planning and stakeholder collaboration in all aspects of international education. So that signals to you, right? It's not just if you are hosting only incoming students, for instance, there are others within your institution, organization that need to be involved in this proactive approach. And you'll hear a lot about collaboration, which I think we know it's a word that we use, sometimes maybe too cliche to say collaboration, but I think you'll see and hear in each module what those intentional collaboration process looks like, right? You don't just start from scratch. There's relationship building. There's all kinds of different things that are involved in collaborative processes and projects. So you'll hear that word very often. So the last one on decision making, I will highlight for you. I also learned the importance of combining a business mindset with a student-centered approach. I love our subject matter expert in business acumen. Sorry, I'm biased here, but she was excellent in sharing her experience, her case examples, and how she, in terms of thinking of a business acumen mindset. I think, again, sometimes no offense to passionate international educators out there, I think we think of the student-centered approach doesn't marry very well with business cases, right? But it does, and it needs to in our field. So I appreciated her insights on that. The learner also says, I now see decision-making as a team effort that draws on diverse perspectives to make more informed strategic choices aligned with broader institutional goals, right? Very intentional there. There are all kinds of stakeholders that this person, this learner gave feedback on, right? More informed, diverse perspectives and strategic choices that align with your institution, right? So not just looking at your office or your department or your unit or your 5 team members alone, right? But what are the broader implications of that? That applies again to the data collection, analysis, and the people development. I also really appreciated the people development piece because sometimes I think even as a beginner, if you will, or a new international educator, you don't think about people development in your own terms. But I think some of you are here because of that. The people development talks about what that means if you manage a team or for yourself as well. So very important there to think of not just individual, but team members and staff and groups that you manage also. So I'll end there, Andy, and hand it over to you.
Thank you. And I think that's a really interesting one to finish on, Joanne, because that notion of, I guess it's the different styles of leadership that are required in our roles, from when we think of leadership and think of teams and how do we develop people and team management and getting the best out of people and creating the right culture, to then the hard skills of data analysis and how does that work, through to business acumen, which, as you say, might seem a bit incongruous, but actually is a critical part of everything we do, whether you work in what might be seen as a more business focused or corporate arm of an institution or not, or business acumen is key to everything we do. And so I think that's some of the really interesting things about the way the competencies play together and develop people at multiple levels. So timeline, and this speaks to one other question that was in there around live element or online. So as Joanne mentioned earlier, the IEPC was built as a self-paced asynchronous course. We wanted to remove the barriers to participation that programs or cohorts often create. We wanted to create a model which would enable anyone to say, yes, this is for me, enroll, join, complete the course. And we see people who do that and come, go through it very quickly, other people who take it more slowly. But the whole thing, from the conception of it through to how it's been designed, is being designed in that way so that you can do it as a self-paced journey. But as we said at the beginning, one of the things that came through very strongly in San Diego was the desire for community and the desire to learn with and from each other. And so listening to that, we decided that there is an amazing opportunity here. There's this amazing network of international education leaders who want to go through this program for their own professional development and personal development, and would love to do that within a community and within a cohort. So this notion of One World came from that. So in this time of division and strife and challenge and all those things that we know about, how can we come together as a global community and to go through this learning journey together? So you can still do this self-paced. You could literally, off the back of this, say, I thought Joanne was fantastic, I have to get into these competencies, I'm going to do it now. You can register and go. Or you might say, well, actually, I'd love to do it, but I'd love to do it as part of the One World program. So what the One World program is a blended program that uses the asynchronous course as its base, but then is supplemented and augmented with live synchronous Zoom sessions that run across a 3-month calendar, which enable people to come together to learn with and from each other as they go through that. So I'm going to explain what that looks like. So this is the official launch of the One World program. Then we start on the 18th of September. So on the 18th of September, everyone who wants to be a part of that program comes to the opening workshop. We bring the cohort together, we connect, we network. There'll be lots of opportunities in smaller breakout rooms for people to connect and share and set their learning goals ahead. We're thrilled that we're going to be joined by Dr. Fanta Aw, who's Executive Director and CEO of NAFSA. I'm sure many of you will know Fanta. If you've not had the chance to meet Fanta, you've got to meet her, you've got to come. She's a phenomenal leader. I've had the great pleasure of meeting her a couple of times, and she's just one of those people you walk away with feeling different and in a really powerful and special way. And so she's going to do the opening keynote and officially open it. We'll then connect with each other. You'll share learning goals. We'll then open the asynchronous courses. You can then start to work your way through them at your own pace. And then a few weeks later, we'll do our first learning group. So this is essentially an action learning set. So the idea is you're going to come, you're going to break out into small coaching groups, and people are going to have the opportunity to share current leadership or professional development challenge that they're facing within their work, which they're asking for help with. And so we'll go through a coaching process to help them to overcome that challenge, to look at it through new eyes, to bring fresh perspectives from your worlds to that so that they can move forward with it. So it's entirely about the cohort helping each other to overcome those challenges. So highly interactive, small group-based, discussion-based activities. We'll do the same again a few weeks later, so more people will have the opportunity to share. And you don't have to come to these, I should say. I hope you do. I hope you want to, but appreciate life, work, love, everything gets in the way at times. So appreciate that you might not be able to, but the opening and the closing session, absolutely. The learning groups, we hope you can make them. And then the program concludes on the 10th of December with a reflection workshop, where we will build on the reflections that you've done through the packages. We'll build on the action plans that you've created and really start to think individually and as a cohort, what are you going to do? How are you going to drive change within the sector? How are you going to become the advocates for international education, the advocates for your students, the advocates for your institutions that you want to be, and what does that look like? So that as a whole, you have that asynchronous space, and then you have 4 sessions that you can come to. So it's an additional 4 hours of live synchronous Zoom sessions where you can connect with wonderful people here from across the world, like hopefully lots of you on the call who'll join us. So that's the One World Program. There's a QR code there to be able to register. There's some questions around cost and scholarships and pass rates and validation and who's it for, which we'll come to in a second. If I may, Joanne, could I just ask a couple of questions of you on behalf of the group in terms of the profile of people who do this? There was another question: how senior do you need to be? Do you have to be working at a university? Could you talk a bit about that, please?
Absolutely. So I will say it ranges from anywhere from newcomer to very seasoned, as you saw from the quote from someone who's been in the field for over 20 years, right? So there's no average profile, if you will, of who our learners are. They come from every type of institution or organization. You don't have to be at a university or a college. You can be at a different organization, a provider that's in the sector. Anyone looking to understand and gain competency in those skills within international education, I would say, is welcome to participate in the program.
I think that's one thing I'd also add. It's interesting to see, one of the things I didn't mention was, and we'll talk about costs in a second, that's the next question I'll ask, is around, there's actually 3 ways you can do this. One is the full asynchronous model. One is joining the One World Program as we've launched today, which has that blended element and that ability to have community. The other way is you can actually buy access to just a package. So we also have loads of people who are saying, agile leadership, that's the thing I'm after, or decision making or compliance or whatever it may be, and are signing up just to do that because that's the very particular piece of development that they need, that they've identified or maybe their institution has. Joanne also mentioned that we have institutions who are offering access to this to their staff. And one institution in particular has done exactly that and said to staff, here are the 4 packages, pick one. Pick the one that actually resonates most with you. So actually people are getting the opportunity in that model to pick what it is they want to do based upon where they currently are now, or it could be about where they want to get to, which I think also speaks to some of the questions that we've had that have come in around, how does this help people's careers progress within the industry? And I think that's a really important part of this. This isn't, this is about your development, your growth, but also hopefully, helping you to position yourself for future roles, for future growth, for future opportunities, to take on more responsibilities. And I think that's why things like the micro credentials and certification, digital badges are a big part of it, because it's, again, that recognition and articulation of what you've developed. But let's talk cost, Joanne. I know there's a couple of questions that have come in around.
Yeah,
do you have
absolutely.
to pay? Is it free access? Are there scholarships?
Yeah, so we are offering this at a NAFSA member rate or a non-member rate. So you don't have to be a member of NAFSA to participate in the program. It's $695 for NAFSA members for the full certificate, or $795 for non-members for this full certificate. And as we mentioned, there are 4 packages of 3 modules each. And those come at $225 for NAFSA members or $300 for non-members. I will say, Andy, also to add to the cohort model that some institutions have adopted, right? Some institutions have adopted the full certificate. We also have a graduate program that's coming up with the fall semester, their new cohort of graduate students. They're adopting this officially as part of their curriculum. So the faculty who are teaching the courses to the graduate students are going through this program with the graduate students who are going through their master's program at the time also. So different ways of thinking about your professional development journey.
Yeah, indeed. And I think, there's a question here around, is it US focused or is it global? Does it work for people who are outside the US system? What I would say, obviously NAFSA is about as, is such a big US, North American brand, obviously, and obviously your conference is a part of that. But no, this is very much a global program by virtue of NAFSA and their global reach, rather than just US reach, Times Higher Education, Common Purposes, global reach as well. And the subject matter experts come from across the world. It was designed by people from across the world. And we've had people from all corners of the world, as I mean, Joanne's slide earlier showed, from Australia to here, there, and everywhere in between, who've been a part of this, and it's very deliberately been designed to be international and international education focused in the broadest of senses there. I would also, I mean, there's a question here about sort of the equivalent level of this qualification. Is it validated by any university? I guess to that, I mean, Joanne, you talked to it just now. We've designed it in a way where people can embed this into courses and into curriculum in that way, as we're starting to see, but also that it's driven by the three partners. So this isn't accredited, as it were, by a particular institution. This is a professional certificate offered by the three partners and draws on the three partners' expertise and thought leadership and the international education professional competency framework that has been created. So those are very much the cornerstone to that. But I don't know, I mean, Joanne, if there's anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything like this out there. That's why we were very excited to launch it a year ago in May at our conference last year. I think it's important to realize that I think, the journey or the history of international education has come a long ways, where I think many of us realize wherever you are, it used to be just a profession that if you were a faculty member that spoke a foreign language, you got to be in charge of international education, right? Or you took some trips overseas and then they said, okay, now you know because you've, cross-culturally gone somewhere else different, right? But I think the professionalization of the international education profession journey or field itself is important to recognize that we've come a long way. It is a sector, it's a field, it's professional. It requires you to have competencies. And so that's why this certificate, I think, is a recognition of understanding that we've come a long ways, that you need a special skill set to be an international educator. And that's what the credential speaks for itself.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Joanne, absolutely. And I think, yeah, that lived reality through the framework, through the research, through the subject matter experts very much frames it in that way. I know there's a couple of questions that came in on the pre-reg form as well, around, well, is there an age limit to apply to the program? No, because I think if you're in the sector and you're keen to learn, you are very, very welcome. I mean, I guess this time commitment piece, we talked about 60 to 70 minutes per package, per module, and then obviously there's the action learning plans and so on. So it's really up to you, as I say, in terms of how you engage with that and whether you can work through it quickly, whether you're able to set a particular time each week that you work on it, where you can go through it. So you have access. We do recommend that you go through it, within a few months, and there are some timelines set around that. But other than that, it's yours to go through as you wish. There was a question around modules dedicated to data analytics and AI. We do talk about data analysis. We do talk about data management, as has been shared within that. I don't know if there are any other questions that people want to put into the chat. Hopefully we've answered them as we've gone through, but please do ask any other questions. I don't know, Joanne, are there other things that you think it would be helpful for people to know based upon the conversations you've been having with folk in the sector?
No, I think that it's been a positive experience for the learners as we've shown with data and their feedback and comments about the applicability. and the inclusion of different perspectives and voices that it's not just within your office that you learn from, but across the sector itself. And I think Saima has a comment in the Q&A about the professional development challenges in terms of skills gaps, which this addresses, lack of mentorship, balancing work and learning. I think that the participating in the One World Program, Andy, as we envision the groups that come together, will address some of these, right? The mentorship piece, the balancing work and learning piece. I think it's important to highlight, right? NAFSA and our partners, it's about community, it's about sharing, and the expertise. We can only grow and learn when we share with each other. I think that's important to emphasize.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, that's why One World now exists, and that's why we're very excited to be launching it. But similarly, recognize that for some people, you may just want to get started. You may think, actually, this is going to really help, and you can dive in and be a part of that. You can also be a part of One World as well if you want to, in terms of those live sessions. Don't feel like you have to wait. But you can enroll, you get given access straight away. You can then get access, or you can wait, depending on how you want to do it. And as we've been saying, you can get individual access to packages, or if you're thinking more broadly, if you're thinking about your team, or if you're in a position to be thinking about your institution as a whole, there's lots of interesting ways that this can support, and we welcome the opportunity to talk to you about that. So as an individual, I mean, we'll show the QR code at the end, stick your phone in it, you can sign up then and there straight away. There we go. Thank you, Andrea. Or you can reach out to us directly and ask a question. If you're interested in different ways that this could work for you and for your team and for your institution. But yeah, we'd love to see you at the One World launch on the 18th of September. We know Fanta would love to see you there and would love to meet you as well, and it'd be an amazing opportunity for her to connect with this amazing global community. But I think from my side, I don't think there's anything else I would add other than say a massive thank you to you all for your interest, for your curiosity. If I go back to that poll at the beginning, most of you not really knowing that much about this. Thank you for your curiosity and for your interest and engagement with your professional development. And we hope that you'll be a part of this with us ahead. So thank you to Joanne, thank you to Andrea for all your help and support. We'll send you a recording of the webinar. If you have any questions, reach out to us directly. But otherwise, thank you one and all. Have good mornings, afternoons, evenings, wherever you are joining us from. Thanks, everyone.